All right, we're doing the National Homebrew Day American Wheat Extract batch, and I decided in this demonstration to teach people how to use the grains. Ready to steep the grain. We've heated the water to 160. We're going to put the grain in. I got a half a pound of Munich malt. We're going to steep it in around 155, 158 degree water. Technically, this grain needs to be mashed, and at this temperature it should convert in 30 minutes. So I'm going to let it steep for at least 30 minutes, and when we're done steeping it, then I'm going to do a little sparge on it, and then we'll add the extract. All right, now that our grain is steeped here for 30 minutes, we're going to remove our grain, and we're going to do a technique known as sparging it, which will release a lot more sugar out of the grain and release a little more flavors that the grain is trying to absorb and hold into it. But you have to be careful when you sparge that when you rinse the grain, sparging means rinse the grain, that you don't aerate the wort, and you don't want any splashing. You don't want it suspended above the liquid, except just enough where it goes into the liquid. You don't want it to go from large heights. So I'm not going to keep it up here. I'm going to suspend it down in here. And I got my water that I'm going to rinse the grain with right here. And I just get a little cup. And your sparge water is never hotter than 170 degrees. Some people say 172. I keep it around 170 degrees. And all you do is you gently rinse the grain that you saw earlier that we put into the grain bag. And it's a half a pound of grain. And so the rule of thumb on that is about a quart of water. So I'm going to rinse it here with about a quart of water. I've already used a couple cups. Never squeeze your grain. You squeeze your grain, you release tannins and bitter astringency out of the grain husk. Also, nothing hotter than 170 degrees ever touches your water, or else you also release those same bitter astringency tannins out of the grain husk. Okay, now that we've sparged our grain with 170 degree water, I'm going to let it sit here a little while, make sure it drains out. Careful not to squeeze anything. Careful that I don't introduce any oxygen from dripping from high heights. And now that we're done sparging our grain and steeping our grain, the next thing is to introduce our extract, and we'll get to that next. Okay, now that we've steeped the grain and sparged the grain, we're going to introduce our fermentables to our wort. And this recipe calls for 7 pounds of wheat malt extract and 0.3 pounds of Munich, which I have in this bucket, liquid malt extract. It's important when you introduce your extract that you do not introduce it while the flame is on, or you'll risk scorching or burning the extract on the bottom, because this heavy syrup will sink right to the bottom. So I got the heat off. I got a wort around 170 degrees, hot enough to dissolve all this syrup, and here we are introducing the extract. And I add a little bit, and it takes a little bit of time, and we get it all good and dissolved. I got a nice stainless steel spoon, and you can see what a long time it'll take. You can also use dry malt extract, which has less water content, so a little more concentrated, and it'll float, and it'll dissolve a little easier, but the recipe called for liquid, so I'm going to use the liquid malt extract. As you're stirring it in, again, you want to be gentle, not to introduce oxygen, called hot side aeration. It's true that I'm going to be boiling for an hour. When you boil, you do boil away some oxygen, but you never boil away all the oxygen. Okay, we're going to introduce a little more. I got that first lot dissolved. And I'll continue doing this until I get it all in there. Now that we've dissolved all the extract into the wort, the recipe calls for first wort hopping. So before we bring it to a boil, we're adding the Chinook bittering hops to our American wheat beer. And there we are adding it. I got it in a hop sock that makes straining easier after the boil. So we're going to add it right there into the wort. We're going to get our fire stick. Get the heat on her. Put our thermometer in there so we know when we're ready to boil over. Stick it in there, and that's it for now until we begin boiling. Well, now we've brought our wort to a boil. Make sure you get it calmed down. Never walk away from a boil. It'll always boil over. We got it turned down. We got a nice, good rolling boil going. And all we need to do is boil for another hour. And after an hour, we'll cool the wort, add it to our fermenter, add water, bring it up to 5 gallons, aerate it really good, and introduce our yeast. And I'm going to go ahead and pitch White Labs American Hefeweizen yeast, and we're going to turn this into American wheat into American Hefeweizen. So we can see we have a good boil going. All we need to do is monitor it. Here we are, into the boil, and I'm going to take full advantage of the swimming pool and not having a wort chiller, an immersion chiller, to cool the wort. I'm going to stick it in my swimming pool. You could use your sink or a big rubber tub or any type of container that whatever you use to boil in will fit in with ice water. But here I'm just going to sit here relaxing, enjoying the day, having a beer, and cool my wort here in the swimming pool.
Look at that right there.
The high score in that style is
Thanks for coming.